If you're, whoever's going to talk should either have this or be sitting next to each other.
Okay.
So,
Well, yeah, then I'll just pass it back and forth when
well, we can do that
yeah.
a little bit.
Okay.
And I may switch over to using a phone because for some reason the battery in that damn thing
Oh,
didn't
really?
charge last night. So
Always something. Okay, let's get started. Do I need this?
Let's talk about the sweepstakes prize and
Okay.
where that came from, and I can
Okay.
say a little word about the cabinet.
Okay, great. Yeah, that sounds good. Like a great idea.
While we're waiting to get set up,
You want the
Steve, a few months ago, let the executive committee know that a donation had come in. I'm going to pass the mic right back to him in a second on a very significant product, and that is the RCA TRK5. We know that 602 of them were made. We know that fewer than 10 exist. And the museum already has one. I think there's probably maybe one or two people here who have one. I don't know. But there is one extra. So I'll pass this to Steve.
Okay.
He can describe the details.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I was contacted by a guy a few months ago who said he had a TRK9. And I said, okay, and he wanted to donate it. Well, by the time, a guy in California, and by the time the pictures arrived, it was a TRK5. And the story is that the set was owned by his father, bought new, who lived in New Jersey. They used it for years. In fact, inside was a service, a tag from a local service shop that worked on it in the 50s, and he I guess it obviously was outdated, so he put it in the basement. And a couple of years later, they had a flood, and so the bottom 4 or 5 inches were just rotted. So the cabinet was in really bad shape. And I guess he got it. I don't know how it got to California, but he'd had it for quite a while, and he decided he wanted to donate it. And then we were thinking about a prize for this year, and we really hadn't come up with anything. We had our first thought was the Visionette, but then the feeling was, and talking to the board members, is that that was too much of a niche product and that it wouldn't have a wide appeal. And so we decided to delay the sweepstakes. Normally we award the prize at the convention, but this year we're going to be starting the sweepstakes next week, as soon as I can get the pictures taken and it set up. And obviously the ticket sales are sold online, and then in August we'll have the drawing. Dave knew somebody who had done some wonderful cabinet work, and so I'll turn it over to him to talk about that.
So it's actually Blake's suggestion that we possibly go ahead and fund the restoration of the cabinet. And so there's a gentleman named Greg Ziesmer in Indianapolis who owns an antiquity furniture restoration place. He does a lot of work with our state museum in Indiana, restoring things. And he has done work for me on a couple of really nice pieces. He's done work for Blake as well. So long story short, the board decided to go ahead and fund the restoration of the cabinet and wanted to make sure it was available to be here so we could all see it, so that once sweepstakes tickets are available, which will be soon, you'll appreciate what it is. It's sitting in the 1939 room around Nipper, and so not only can you see the finished cabinet, the unrestored chassis is there, the picture tube is there, and I also brought all the pieces that were left over. So, replacing veneers, obviously, but also, honestly, it was listing kind of like the Titanic, backwards. When we got it, Larry has some pictures of when it showed up here. So it no longer lists, which is good, and hopefully it will be a very fruitful and profitable activity for us. I understand from David that we are now online, so Steve, I'll pass these microphones back to you to start the meeting.
Okay. Let me put this thing on. What's that? Yeah. There we go. Okay, thank you, Dave. Yeah, in fact, it's listed so much, it was so rotted at the bottom that when I had it shipped back, I originally, I moved some of my household stuff out to Colorado, and I have a guy out there that does very nice work too. So so I put it in that shipment, and it ended up in our storage locker in Boulder. And then this guy was so booked up and so forth, and then Dave came along with this idea for the guy in Indianapolis. So it had to get back to Columbus or to Indianapolis. So I used U-Ship, and when the guy picked it up, he said, it's probably better to ship it upside down. So we had taken the chassis out before, so it arrived here upside down, so it wouldn't crumble more.
And it arrived here right side up.
Yeah, right. Yes, you brought it right side up. Okay, let's convene our annual meeting. Welcome everybody. Anybody that has any comments or questions at any point, just chime in. This is very informal, obviously. First thing on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from last year, and I emailed copies to everybody. Does anybody have any comments or corrections?
I move to accept the minutes as printed.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Good, okay. Let's see I know we have, this year we had a problem with several of our usual attendees had conflicts and weren't able to come to the convention. So there are a lot of familiar faces that you guys don't see here tonight, or this. It's been a long weekend. This morning. Anyway, let me introduce what board members are here. Let's see. Start with Dave Sika, Matthew, Bob Dobush, Dave, and Blake and Dan are both here. Great. So we got most people here, but we're missing some people. I know they're watching. They told me they're watching on the live feed, and in fact, one of them may call in, may have some comments or questions. And that brings us to the election of the board. We had 4 candidates, all of them very qualified. And as is typically one of them was a new person, and the other 3 were incumbents. Dave Abramson, Barry Bennett, and Chuck Conrad and James O'Neill. Barry Bennett had an interest in being on the board. He didn't realize that he thought there was an opening when he applied. So his idea wasn't to try to displace anybody, it's just that he thought it was an opening. And I think he'd make a wonderful board member because he's local. He has been very helpful with the museum, and I think he'd be so the next time we have an opening, I think Barry would be a great candidate. But anyway, as is typical, the incumbents won. And if anybody wants to know the vote totals, I can be glad to give them to you, but I don't think it matters. But so we have our same 3 board members are elected for 3 years, and the way our bylaws work is we elect about 1/3 of our board every year. So next year we'll have 3, maybe 4 people, I can't remember, up for re-election. All right, let's move on to my report. We had income, and again I sent the financial statements out. We had income of about $42,000 and expenses of about $48,000. That doesn't mean we're in a deficit. We had a surplus from last year. If you look at last year's report, we're basically we spend what we get. And there's plenty coming in from the sources that we have to cover the operation of the museum. Larry's our major expenses are Larry's salary, utilities, and insurance is quite expensive. So those are the major things. But anyway, our income comes from memberships. We sell a lot of picture tubes, and that helps a lot. And we also have a big stock of parts here that we get we probably do 2 a week, but still that's 100 a year, and we get $25 for each one, so that's $2,500 in income. Some advertising revenue, though that seems to be diminishing. I don't understand. I don't know anything about it. It's just whatever Google sends us
From the website?
on the website. Yeah.
Yeah, they have like tennis, you're selling shoes and one says watch TV for free, that kind of thing. It's on here, but I mean, that's income.
It's income, and occasionally I think we had something that was sort of, it wasn't pornographic, but it wasn't appropriate, and I just, Google does that, and I'm surprised. I think they must have just made a mistake. It's only one time we've had that, but it's just generic stuff, and it brings in a couple of $1,000s a year. So anyway, the point is that I think we're in great shape going into the future. We do have an issue at some point, and that is I'm not going to be able to do this forever. I'm just turned 80. I'll do it as long as I can, and as long as you guys want me. But at some point, the museum is going to be facing the problem of who runs it. And there's a fair amount of work involved. It's by no means a full-time job, but it's a lot of work. And we may be in a position where we have to hire somebody. And if that happens, then the income is going to have to increase, and the board will have to deal with how to do that. But not a problem now. And we have about $11,000 in the bank right now, prior to this auction and so forth. The last year, we had a net income of about $10,000 from the everything in the convention. The convention itself breaks even, pretty close to it in terms of, the membership, the admission fees and stuff like that. Just covers the cost of the event. The vast majority of which is the catering for lunch and dinner. And we make our money from sale of museum items that are surplus and commission on other people's sales in the auction. So we made about $10,000 last year. And we have a fair amount of donations come in at the convention too, cash donations. So this year I should mention that we did substantially better. We had some high income. The Visionette was ours. The CT100 was ours. A couple of other things brought a few $100. So we made about $10,000 between sale of our items and commissions, and then so we did fine, and we've got the income coming in from the sweepstakes, which I think is going to be averaged $11,000 the last 2 years. I think with the TRK5 it's going to be higher, but I don't know how much higher. So we're going to have some cash, more cash than we need for our basic expenses. And we have 2 projects. The first one is this area right here. I'll talk about it later. And the other is the parking lot. We keep putting it off, and we got to do something about that. So we may have the money to do both of those this year if things keep going well. Our membership is about 170 right now, which
compared to last year?
we had 160 at the end of last year, and we've got 170 now. So now most of our memberships come in our beginning of the year when we do our membership drive, and also people coming to the convention. But we do have them dribble in, for the rest of the year. So I suspect we're going to have another 10. So 180 compared to 160.
I thought it was very exciting yesterday to have a 13-year-old boy here interested in vintage.
Yes.
about the age that I first got interested in.
Yeah.
And of course, my parents told me I was crazy. So, you know, look what where that led me. I think we should be encouraging the youngsters as much as we can.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, you probably know, if any of you are members of any other organizations that deal with old stuff, like antique radio clubs or clock clubs or whatever, all of them are having difficulty with membership because everybody's getting older and dying, and new people aren't coming in. Fortunately, we're not having that. You know, we're having new blood come in, and which is essential for us to survive. So hope the 13-year-old sticks with it.
You should have given him a TV
I was
set.
just gonna say that.
Right.
Send him a old TV
Right.
He bought two.
and a disclaimer.
Yeah.
And in the auction, his mom was egging him on. Go.
Yeah, I know. That's yeah, right. Right. Yeah. Yeah, they came last year too.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
They came to the swap meet in the fall last year.
Yeah.
Did they really? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I helped him out. He was trying to select a first TV to do, and he was looking at a broadcast monitor. His dad, maybe we can add a speaker to this. I'm like, you know, there's a nice Zenith portable over there. It's gonna be a much better first project. So.
Right. Right. Equipment donations. About $32,000 estimated value of the donations we got during the year, including the most significant things are Baird T18C, a British console set. We have one on display here, so this one has an interesting story. It was a collector in San Francisco owned it, and it's top heavy. It's a console, but it's real narrow, but the chassis is up high. And during the San Francisco earthquake, it fell over and broke the picture tube, unfortunately. So anyway, Matt has just bought it.
Is that the original?
What's that?
The 1906 earthquake?
No. I don't think so. The British were early with TV, but not that early. Right.
I have that and plan. I'm not giving a timeline on this, but plan to have I know people who work in lab glass to have a new bulb blown to try to replace the shattered one. So we'll see how that goes.
We do have what's left of the old
Yes,
tube,
it's
so
a
we've got
copy.
something to work with, right?
Yeah.
We also got the Western Visionette that we sold because we have a better example in the museum. That Franken Monster TRK-12 that was for sale. That sold for $100. Now, you know, maybe a few years ago I would have said, nah, we'll hold on to it. We'll find a chassis somewhere, and we would. You know, they are out there. In fact, I was just talking to the guy who bought it about. I'm going to go through the database and see who might just have a chassis, and maybe they can buy a chassis for it, and then he has something that's worth a little more than $100.
If you can find a CRT.
If you can find a CRT, yeah, all right. And then John Folsom donated that Silvertone version of the TRK-12 out there, which is a beautiful set. And I suspect we're going to be getting more things from him. He's starting to thin out his collection, which would be wonderful. And the final thing is that the two other things, the TRK-5 that we've already talked about, and you may have noticed out there a picture phone Model 1, which is, you know, I don't know, there can't be very many of them that have survived.
Was that Lab Guy World's one? Or?
No, this is a different one. Yeah. No, his is the Model 2.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah,
Makes
right.
sense.
He donated it several years ago.
Steve, what's the story on the donated prototype plasmids?
Oh, okay. We had, for those of you that are on the monthly Zoom meeting, we had a presentation about this. It's called Lucitron, and it was a startup company in the early days of flat screen, and this was an attempt to develop a flat screen. It didn't get very far. I'm going to be posting stuff on the website soon, but it's only black and white, and the resolution is awful. When you see the pictures of the pictures off the screen, it's terrible. They built a number of them, sold a few to the Navy. I guess they were just buying them to evaluate them, and they had plans for, how to solve all their problems and make it a viable product. And then they went under, like a lot of startups. And so this is I'm sure the only surviving model of it.
About what year?
In the 80s,
Okay.
yeah. We've already talked about the sweepstakes.
When will the sweepstakes end?
August,
August.
yeah, right. Give people time to get to buy tickets. Any questions about any of this? I think people have been chiming in as
What about ending it on like when we do our fall swap meets?
good idea.
I would,
That generates buzz to have
Good
it
idea.
on the swap meet.
Good idea. I'll
Where's the
do.
fall swap meeting?
We tentatively in the middle of October.
Yeah.
End as early as the end of September, as late as the middle of October. We kind of have to. There's a couple factors that go into play: my schedule, Larry's schedule, and then also Ohio State games.
Right. Yeah.
no, I like that idea a lot. Maybe we can even attract some more people for this fall swap meet if we can make
Yes.
a bit of an event out of the
Yes.
closing. And I do know that we get different clientele for that than we typically do for the convention. So
Yeah.
sometimes we're able to move items we wouldn't otherwise.
Yeah.
Right, and I think that's the guy that runs this, the company that does these sweepstakes, says the longer you have to sell tickets, the better you're going to do.
Yeah.
So that makes sense to extend it.
I'll make it a point to try and get maybe a tentative date to you so we can have.
Good,
something
sounds
come
good.
up.
I think it's going to take me about a week to get it listed. So if you could get it to me before then, that would be great.
That sounds
No later than
wonderful.
Tuesday.
Good idea.
We bookend it with, hey, we're opening it. This
Yeah.
we can preview it at the convention, and then we close it at the.
That's what we did last year with the sweepstakes. and it was
Yeah.
good.
Right, and I'm thinking we might want to do a couple of other, maybe expand the sweepstakes, the fall meet in some way. I don't know what, but you might think about that. What else could we do on that weekend?
Maybe a workshop of
A workshop or something like, yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah,
If I can chime up, again, it's all about finding volunteers, but I think it would be really fun to have a sort of live restoration day where we have some people working on one of the sets from the museum, getting it going, where people can come and watch the process of getting an old TV fixed. I think that would be really fun. Again, if we could find someone to volunteer to, come and spend the day or
well, I think that's a great idea, and we have a guy, Dave Perdue, who's been restoring sets.
He's the one.
He's restored, I think, 4 sets and took 2 more with him this time.
He's a rock star, yeah.
So I think, and he lives close. He's in West Virginia, so maybe he'd be willing to do it.
We gotta try and campaign him to come. I don't think he came to the swap meet last year. He always
Yeah.
comes to the convention though. He
Yep.
might have. I don't remember. But
Yeah.
I bet you if we asked him nicely, he might.
Yeah, right.
Well, just to make a suggestion.
Just a second.
Whatever it might be worth.
No, I thought this was one of our board members, but it's spam.
Sometimes taking a legitimately broken device and trying to do a real-time demo of a repair can be like watching grass grow.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe a better way to do it would be to take a working device, introduce some faults, and then go back.
Good, that's a good
that way.
idea. Okay.
We could do it several different ways. I think it's going to be
You
up
could
to the
also
person who's
reality
doing it.
TV it and script it.
Yeah, right.
Script it, just figure out what we want, like pre-select what we're gonna have going and have it
Right.
switched, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't disagree. That's one way to do it. I was sort of more imagining we just have a chassis and someone's working there recapping the thing, and people can come over and, hey, this is the process you have to go through to get one of these working. What's this, what's that? Not necessarily like big reveal at the end of it working. Just seeing the
Seeing the
restoration
process, yeah.
The only caveat I can think
Yeah.
to is that is, we all have our very specific ways we like to restore a set, and they don't always match up with
Right.
someone
Oh.
else's.
Well, but so people can comment and, tell the guy he's doing it wrong or whatever.
Right, but I mean, like, when I was redoing the Predicta a few years ago,
Yeah.
I had a few guys come in, you're using too much solder. Why? I handed him a soldering iron. That got him to clear the room. But
thinking about trying to get people like that kid, people from the more general
Right.
public who can see the process of what we do, less the audience being us. Because we all know how TVs are fixed. That's not really novel. But
Right.
it's for people who we're trying to introduce to the hobby is really who the target audience is. So I'm not thinking anything terribly valuable here. VT71, just something that's
Yeah.
cool looking that
Right.
we can work on. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
I think these are great ideas.
Plays into it better, I think.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, we'll work on that. I think that sounds perfect. The final thing I have on the agenda is to talk about our thinking about the new display area. Sort of been putting it off because it's a lot of work. Not just building it. We can hire somebody to do the construction. The problem is, look at all the stuff we've got there. And we came up with a plan for how it can be done, and that is we're going to put the ceiling in first. There are only really two walls that have to be put in, the one right here, and then a little one back in the back where the hallway is. So just maybe do that framing and then put ceiling in and put plywood on top, and then all of these CRTs can store up top like we're doing here. So we're working out a time for Dan and Blake have agreed to come down for on a weekend and get ready for us to do that, and then I'll have I got a guy I know that does cheap carpentry work that can come in and do that part of it, and then after we get it all moved, then we can finish the rest of it. Yeah, right.
The other thought too, Steve, when we were talking on Friday, was to consolidate the one smaller room into the bigger room, the European sets. So
Yes.
we can start, because the plan was initially to make that an exhibition area, but
Right.
then someone else brought up, I can't remember who, maybe it was Dan, I can't remember, but the thought was maybe the exhibition area should be right when you walk into the museum, so that's more of, maybe you too, Matt.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, several people brought this up. Well, I think
Yeah.
we mostly agree, unless someone wants to speak up, that was a good idea.
Yeah,
Right.
So the thought was to kind of, because this, even if we get the ceiling up and stuff, still probably is going to take a little bit longer than where we want to try and have something
Right.
going. If we can consolidate the one smaller European room into the bigger one, at least that small room can become an exhibition area, and we can
Yeah.
try and have a
And that's doable because we have a lot of duplicate in that British pre-war room. We have a bunch of sets that are very, very similar. So we can, thin that down, put it all in one room. And then I've heard a lot of discussion, and I think it's true. People, our collection is basically ends in the 50s. And there's a lot of interest I hear this comment frequently, and other people have too. Well, this is great. I love this old stuff, but I don't remember the set I had when I was growing up. So make this area more modern stuff. Going up, starting from up through the end of the CRT era, and put a couple of examples of each iteration of a Yeah, right. And that way we attract, I think, a lot of the new people who would be interested in this hobby. The number of people that are, I'm astounded if I look at Facebook, the number of people that, somebody will say some generic RCA 80s set is selling it for $500, or there'd be a comment on there, that's not a bad price. And to us, of course, that sounds completely ludicrous, but there's a whole world out there that are really interested in stuff. So anyway, that's the thinking, and we hope to get that done by the end of this year.
So quick question. So are we talking about then auctioning or raffling off some of the British sets?
No.
Okay, I
No.
don't think that's something we should be doing.
No. We will put them in storage.
anything. I think the thought was anything that couldn't be tastefully displayed would just be elsewhere, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
'Cause I
Yeah.
do feel that we have a mission to preserve the
Oh, no.
collection.
I mean, our policy is unless it's a duplicate,
Yeah.
that is
I have a
in worse
question on that.
condition.
Some other people have been asking me too throughout the weekend. Is any of, and I get it because I know some
Right.
of the high dollar stuff back there is super rare, but does the museum have any intention of selling any of some of the higher dollar stuff in those two back rows?
I think we ought to. I think we ought to do
we
that.
should too.
Yeah.
The storage rows here.
Yeah.
I think it would make room, and I think that
Yes.
I think that there's a couple things there. I think there's a pre-war back there, especially that could potentially really fund the museum nicely. but
Yeah, yeah. I think that's the. I think we ought to do that.
I think that's a good idea. I certainly do not disagree. I think we should, somebody who's not me, because I'm not gonna be here, should make a list, and we should bring it up with the board and decide sort
Sure.
of item by item what,
Yeah.
what, you know, belongs in the collection
Right.
or not.
Well, when these guys come down,
Yeah.
I don't know how much time they're going to have,
we're
but,
gonna, I don't know about Dan, but I'm shooting for like a Saturday, Sunday type of deal.
then we ought to get quite a bit done,
Yeah.
and maybe we get some other volunteers to help
Yeah, I think
move
that's
stuff.
That's the thought.
Yeah, yeah.
Steve, this relates to something I was gonna bring up in new business, but you guys are already there. Do we have an inventory of everything we have that's on display?
No.
We do not.
No.
All right, so I know insurance is our biggest expense.
Yeah.
Let's think the unthinkable. A fire.
Right.
I mean, it happens. We have, not only do we have irreplaceable artifacts, but a picture tube fire would create a hazardous waste dump.
That's true. Yeah.
And I think the responsible thing for us to think about soon is finding a way, and maybe there's a committee of the board that could be put together, finding a way to inventory what we have. For insurance purposes, number one. Number two, Steve is not going to be with us forever. Many of us are not going to be here forever, right? We don't know when a bus is going to hit us or whatever. So it would be good to have an inventory. I'm going to assume, Steve, that we also probably don't have a record of who has loaned a product to the museum versus who has given us a
Yeah, we
product.
do. We do have
We do
that.
have those.
Yeah. Right.
So when, I'll use Cliff as an example, if, Cliff Benham is passed, if he had something loaned to us, what happens? Does his family come back and say, I want that back? Or
Right.
do they give it to, I mean, there just needs to be a
Yes.
going forward process. I don't mean to hog
No.
the conversation, but I just wanted to raise that issue.
Yeah.
Do you have a fire alarm system or fire detection
Yes.
system? But not
Yeah.
sprinklers.
But not well. Sprinklers, I
Sprinklers
think,
are worse than,
are worse than
particularly if they go off everywhere.
because the collection will be, the building isn't worth anything. It's the collection, and that'll destroy.
Just do what we can to minimize the risk of fire, make
Yeah.
sure nothing's plugged in,
Right.
overloaded or anything.
Yeah.
I know that won't completely do it.
Yeah. I had Larry start on the inventory, but he's just has not had time. I think now that the convention's over, that he can get back to it. But he had done most of the pre-war stuff, I think. But we can get him back on it, but I think that's essential that we have it.
Well, I would, having Larry do it is fine, but I think probably we need to have a process. And the board separately probably, and maybe in the subject of the future, needs to make this an element. I know in collections that I have run in the past, we have hired university students who are specialists in museum studies. And that was an expense. It wasn't a huge expense, but then you have a document, and something. Again,
Right.
I'm just sort of thinking worst case. Let's say
Right.
that we have to vacate this property, not because of a fire, but because we want to do something else someday. It would be good to know what we actually have and why. To your point about the British stuff,
Well, I thought the city wanted this.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Yeah, I
we
thought
rest-
they-
Well, we've heard, that was, I think, as I said at the time, I thought that was unlikely to actually ever happen. And in fact, just recently, I ran into the architect who proposed it to me and said, what's happening? And he said, nothing. So,
We're safe here for a moment.
yeah, right, yeah. And the other thing about this, one of the things I wanted to do for a while is this plan of filling in here. That allows us to include the CRT rebuilding room as a museum display. We put signs up there describing what each of the pieces of equipment do there. So I think it's nice to get that all done. Well, that's all I've got. Has anybody got other issues they'd like to raise? Yeah.
Yeah, so, I know this is a little bit of a difficult issue, but I want, you raised it to start out with. I feel that we should investigate what the options would be for a fire suppression system, non-water, of course. As a responsibility, speaking as my opinion as a member of the board, that our primary responsibility as a museum is the
Right.
preservation of the collection, and that strikes me as the biggest risk.
Something like Halon?
It's got to be Halon, yeah, right,
It may
Yeah.
well be that it is completely and utterly unaffordable.
Right.
But I think we should know what it is and at least be able to say we've done our due diligence and
I think that's a good
can't,
idea. Okay.
we can't afford to do this, or
Right.
if we think we might be able to start putting money aside.
To buy really
To do
good
it.
too about getting rid of some of the doubles in the line too. There's some good stuff there. We could still even if it's an expense, we still may very well be able to fund it by just doing our diligence.
And
Right.
also talk to the insurance companies, say, hey, if we put in this system, what would that do to our premium?
Right, yeah, that's a good point.
So that might kind of pay, not pay
Yep.
for itself, but down the pay
Right.
forward.
Good point, good point.
And, you know, that raises another point. We haven't reviewed our insurance coverage in years. We ought to do that too, because we probably are underinsured.
Rates are sky high on auto insurance, so I'm sure those rates will be up.
Yeah. Fortunately, our rates have not gone up much over the years, but, you know,
I just was wondering, like John, I wanted to get insurance on like John's collection, and they want actual appraisals on the stuff.
yeah,
Like our typical homeowners coverage only includes like
Same thing
5,000
happened
per
with
property.
you.
yeah.
Somebody's saying American Collectors Insurance.
They said if you want more, you gotta buy a
Yeah.
supplement,
That hasn't been raised with me. They didn't ask for, all they asked for a dollar amount. That's it.
Depends on the insurance.
Yeah,
And it's a little bit different by homeowners insurance versus as a nonprofit museum buying insurance for the organization. So I think we're just gonna have to talk to the insurance brokers about what that actually means.
Well, when the set is worth $10,000 and stuff, I mean, are you gonna get that value? Do you have replacement costs, or these things are irreplaceable?
Yeah, you can't replace it.
yeah,
You fine line there.
yeah. I think that all needs to be reviewed.
Give you if it did burn,
Yeah,
if you don't have the appraisal for it.
right.
And who's qualified to do appraisals?
Someone made a point over lunch on the weekend that American Collectors Insurance takes you at your stated value. I'm gonna investigate that, because that was the whole point of the conversation.
Right.
I don't have insurance on my predicted collection, and I would like to get that. So my homeowner's insurance laughed at me when I tried to make that happen, like
Well,
literally.
yeah, stated value is the way to go, especially with like automobiles, which I'm involved with, and it's 10% of the cost and it's full value
Yeah.
with a collectible vehicle. So stated value insurance is a great option. Allstate, State Farm, they just got their set limits.
Yeah, but they're just gonna pay you whatever you state the value is.
Yes,
Yeah.
I mean,
yes.
everybody'd be entitled to think
Well, no, not
state
really.
whatever
There's
the
some,
value is and collect on
there's
insurance.
some hoops to jump through, some videos you have to take of your collection, but
Yeah.
I think
it can
anybody
be
in earnest
investigated.
I wouldn't wanna take an insurance claim for my collection.
You would definitely at least need to
Yeah.
avail us a complete inventory of your collection though, for insurance purposes,
I'm sure there'd be documents. Like I said, it was a conversation over dinner. I'm gonna do some diligence on it, because I wanna insure my stuff too, so.
Yeah.
Some museums have a monthly, a video they do of their collection.
Well, you know, I was gonna, that is struck, I think maybe until we get a
Right.
certified complete list, that the next best thing we could do very quickly is just a video walkthrough of the entire collection, and have the person that's doing it just, mention what the set is, what its, model number and so forth. That would be some evidence at least until we get what we really need.
I would like to propose that we propose that the board investigates options for fire suppression. I would like to volunteer to start that process with some
Wonderful.
basic research to be presented at the next board meeting.
Okay.
On this issue for further discussion. I'm not even talking about calling contractors at this point, just basic,
What is it?
encyclopedia research on what are the various types of fire suppression, what are their pros and cons, and I will present that at our next board meeting. If
Wonderful.
the board is okay with that.
Yeah. I don't know if you know.
Marlon's point, maybe we can investigate Ohio State University coming in
For-
and doing a
yeah.
cataloging of our stuff. They
Right.
have a very extensive setup campus-wise. They gotta have
Right.
some museum people there.
Yeah, they're probably looking for, students that want
Paid interns,
summer
you know
work.
what I
Yeah,
mean?
right.
So, as a board member, following on Matt's leadership, I'll take that piece.
Wonderful.
I'll investigate local options for museum science situation. Sounds like we may maybe also need somebody to look at the insurance question.
Yep.
Steve, I don't know whether that's through your agent or your broker or.
Yeah, it's probably through our our agent. It's a small, it's very small operation. I don't know who the insurance company is, but the agent is, he only has 2 or 3 people in his office. But I can certainly see what our coverage is, and we can talk about the next board meeting. We can talk about, what we ought to do. If we need to get proposals for something different.
Maybe if we could get an outline of what the specific coverage we have now is,
Yeah.
and then we could also do some diligence on our own. And
Right.
research options.
Okay. Can do that.
Do we have a volunteer for the insurance question? It seems like we should sort of split this up. a
Yeah.
bit.
I'll do it if you. I mean,
Wonderful. I'd love for you to do
I
it.
can do some investigating on it. I
Yeah.
don't mind, but I'm not. With that being said, I'm not licensed to sell or do anything.
That makes you impartial.
That's right. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Information and present it.
I'm not a fire suppression engineer either. I just think we need to get this topic started.
Yeah, we need to discuss you guys' commission though before you start doing this.
Yeah, right.
One thing about halon is, the way it works is, it removes oxygen very rapidly.
Kills
So,
the people, saves
I
the
was gonna
stuff.
say that, if there was anybody in here at that time, it'd suffocate them. If it went off, and there was any people in here while it's, trying to get out, it would suffocate them.
So we got a real trade-off here, right?
It might be funny, but it's bad.
Larry should be here to discuss
There are ways of handling this. There's typically an emergency alarm that will go off
Yeah.
before.
Probably have to arm that system too, I would imagine. So maybe
Yeah.
while the museum's open, it's disarmed, obviously.
Yeah, there you go. There are ways to deal with
There are ways
it. There have to be, obviously, right?
It's also a major environmental hazard, so
Yeah, they don't-
it is,
Yeah.
they don't like it.
Well,
anymore.
so is, if a fire were to happen here, we would have a hazardous waste.
I realize
right
that.
there.
Yeah.
It's worth it to me to have halon. It is, it's a great fire suppression, but environmental people would not like it.